Welcome to the Observe Day podcast, the show where we celebrate the days that matter. From holidays to meaningful observances, we bring you inspiring conversations, stories, and ideas to make each day count. Whether it's raising awareness, learning something new, or simply sparking joy, this is your space to explore the calendar in a whole new way. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I'm excited to share today's observance with you. Let's dive in. Today, I'm joined by Nancy Napier, a distinguished professor emerita at Boise State University, who has spent decades studying and teaching creativity, strategy, and innovation across the world, from the US to Vietnam and beyond. Nancy is also a prolific writer who has published both non-fiction and fiction, including her debut novel, A Case of Too Many Deaths, and her upcoming release, The Art of Lies. She brings a unique perspective as someone who reinvented herself as a fiction writer after 35 years in academia. Welcome to the podcast, Nancy.
Thank you, Wisdom. It's so nice to be with you.
Yeah. In this conversation, I want us to explore how reading and writing can transform us. Especially, I want us to spotlight the joy of starting something new at any age. Yeah. Okay. September is National Reading New Book Month. What role has reading new books, whether fiction or non-fiction, played in your own life and career?
Oh, my goodness. Reading new books, fiction and nonfiction. I have been a reader since I was a child, and I am curious about all kinds of topics and fields. And so I have to say, I read it now as an adult. I read a lot of book reviews, and then I think I am my library's best customer. So I probably take out 10 or 15 books when I can, 10 books a week. And I don't read them all, but I start them to see if they have things that I would be interested in. So I think it's so important for us to read widely, to read in different areas. So I've been a business professor, but I've always read books about history and about science. And just this week, my book group read a very long book about trees and stories of people who fight for trees and take care of them. So I think it's so important to read lots of different types of books, and it gives me a chance to visit the world without having to leave. I live in a wonderful place and I travel a fair amount, but I can't go to Nigeria every week.
Yeah.
So I would love to read more about Nigeria. So you
Oh.
need to give me some recommendations, perhaps.
That won't be a problem.
Right.
Do you remember a book that completely changed the way you saw the world?
You know, I think there are lots of them. I think one, when I was a child, is a book called A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. And at the end of the book, I realized that the entire story had taken place in like 5 minutes or something. And so the whole notion of time being flexible was just remarkable to me.
Wow.
So that was one important one for me. And then later on, I was doing research on creativity and Einstein, and I read a book by a professor at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He's a physicist, astrophysicist, and he writes fiction and literature.
Yeah.
And he wrote a book. His name is Alan Lightman, and he wrote a book called Einstein's Dreams. And I don't remember how many chapters, let's say 9 or 10 chapters. Every chapter was a different way that Einstein thought about time. And that was another eye opener to me, to think about how this scientist could write so beautifully in literature. And so I think books that tie different fields together, like science and art, and then make you think about things in a very different way. Those have been two, there's so many, but anyway, those are two that come to mind right off the bat. Really wonderful books.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those recommendations. You know, your story is really fascinating because you spent decades, even though you've been reading for like since you were young, you spent decades in academia, you know, talking about business, innovation, and all those kind of things, which they're fun, but moving into fiction writing, that's a different ball game entirely. And for me, I'm curious, what inspired that shift, and how did it feel to become a beginner again?
Oh, that's such a good question. Um, um, my probably the base for me is learning, and I'm curious. And so I always want to be trying new things, learning new things. And I've always read fiction, mysteries, historical fiction, and so forth. So I love that. In my academic world, I needed to study and write about businesses, organizations. And so I wrote, there's a term in academic world, you publish or you perish, you publish or you don't have a job. So I wrote and published articles in academic journals, academic books for 35 years. And as I went through that career, I went from very hardcore academic writing. And then, I don't know, maybe after 25 years, 20 years, I read something that said the average academic article is read by 6 people.
Wow, 6.
And I thought, 6 people. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I began to do things that were more easy to read, accessible to business people and non-business people. So I did a radio program for, I don't know how long, 8 years, a daily program on our national public radio station, very, very short, 5 days a week, just a theme for the week. It was very quick, but something about business or creativity. And that forced me to learn how to write very short things, so 200 words. And that led me into writing a blog for Psychology Today. I wrote an article for our local newspaper, and people would read those things because they could understand them easily. And then I started writing academic books that I thought were easier for business leaders to read. And that sort of led me into how do you tell stories? Because that's how people remember ideas. So even in business, the use of storytelling is so valuable. So I thought, okay, all of that I've been writing. I should be able to write a mystery. I should be able to write fiction. No. And I learned that it was very, very hard. It's quite different. And it forced me to be a beginner, as you said. So this happened maybe in the pandemic time, so 3 years ago or so. And also at that time, I decided in my older years now to learn how to play tennis.
Okay.
Tennis. And I have a family of tennis players. I've never played tennis, didn't do a lot of sports. So I'm a beginner in something physical, a sport, and a beginner in something very mental. And it made me realize how, at least for me, I have to see or hear or do something many, many, many times before it starts to fit, before I understand it. And when I did this, so maybe it was longer ago, 5 years ago, I teach in our executive masters of business program. So these are all very high level people, senior executives in business, in healthcare, in government. And so they're very top level, very smart people, experts in marketing or finance or operations. So they're experts in something, and I'm teaching them strategy or leadership or organizational culture or creativity. And I think, well, it's easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy for them because it's brand new. They're beginners. So with writing and tennis, I thought, I have to, in my teaching, remember that these people are also beginners when we talk about strategy or creativity. It was so helpful for me to think about that and to say, you need to present information 5 different ways, but they don't know that it's 5, the same thing, but they hear it, they see it, they do it, they have an exercise about it, they talk about it. So many different ways to learn something as a beginner was so useful for me.
You
It
talked
was really
about
helpful.
how um, being a beginner influenced your work in innovation, creativity, and as a business professor. But I'm
Yeah.
curious, how did being a business professor, your background in innovation, influence your writing? Before we dive deeper, I'd love to invite you to join the Observe Day newsletter. Every week, I send you highlights of upcoming observances, creative ways to celebrate, and behind the scenes extras from the shows. It's the perfect way to stay inspired and never miss a meaningful moment. Sign up today at observeday.com/join. That is observeday.com/join. Now let's get back to the conversation.
One of the keys to creativity is curiosity, I think. You have to be willing to ask questions, to be a beginner, to not know everything.
Okay.
You also have to be willing to come up with lots of ideas, try those ideas. Most of them fail. And the same thing is true in writing. I'm curious and I need to do research on some of the topics in my book, but I also need to write a lot of bad words, a lot of bad writing before I find maybe 10% of the good. And that's so true in business. You come up with lots of new ideas, but maybe only 10%, 2% are worth using. And I had to remember that when I got to my writing because I thought, oh, come on, I can do this more quickly. No, I cannot. I've learned I really need to expect it's going to take a lot of different drafts. So for my very short pieces, for blog or something, I can do it and I write 10 or 12 drafts, no problem, 300 words, 10 or 12 drafts. With a long book, I have to accept that it's still going to take me 10, 15, 20 drafts, different chunks of the book, but it's going to take doing it over and over. And so that's something in creativity, you expect that you will fail. It's okay. You have to keep trying. You come up with new ways of thinking about things. And that, and to remember, I'm always a beginner. Whatever new project, I'm always the beginner. So accept it. Don't get excited about not being good at it right off the bat. And so that's been useful too. But that's a great question. How has that part influenced the writing? And I knew it in my heart, but until you ask it, I hadn't really thought about it that way. So it's a good question.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with me. One of your first book, your debuts, I'd even say that. Is it debut over it's what's it called?
The Too Many Deaths, that one?
Yeah. It's a true crime novel, right? Now
Based on a real story.
Okay.
Yeah, fictionalized, right?
What drew you to that genre of writing?
I think of mysteries as problem solving. And so that's what we do in business. You have a problem and you figure out how to solve it and you try different ways to solve it, back to creativity. So it's really, I've loved reading mysteries and true crime or fiction because there's a situation that's presented and you need to figure it out. And very often it's not the true situation. So one of the most important things I talk about in my classes is once you know what the problem is, it's easy to find solutions. The bigger question for executives, for senior level leaders, I think for all of us really, is what is the question? So what is the proper question to be going for? Once you know that, usually the problem solution comes. So in a mystery, you constantly have to say, is this really the true problem? Is there something else going on behind it? So I think that's part of it, that it's problem finding and problem solving in business and in writing.
Yeah. Well, uh, the second book, The Art of Lies, that explores the themes of family secrets and art crime again, mystery in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Right. For me, I'm curious. There's so many ideas and so many things you could have written a story about. Why was this story important for you to tell?
Well, it ties to the first one as well. When I first tried to write fiction, maybe 10, 12 years ago, I took an online class and about halfway through, I said, I can't do this. I'm not a good liar. I'm a terrible liar. And one of the other participants said, it's not lying, it's using your creativity, it's using your imagination. And so I said, okay, all right. So then I tried it again and I struggled with coming up with a really interesting problem. And so I started looking at newspaper stories and so forth. And what I discovered is that I need to have a true situation to start with. So the
Mm.
first book was based on a case, a true case in Australia of a woman who has been in prison for 25 years for killing her children. I set it in the United States and fictionalized it, but that was the start. And a lot of the research was from that. Same thing in Vietnam. That book started from a true case of an art exhibit that took place in Ho Chi Minh City, where the art came from Europe by Vietnamese artists. It showed up in Ho Chi Minh City, and it was mostly, I think, 17 out of the 18 paintings were counterfeit, were fraud. And so that was my start. And that led me to learn about art crime. I know something about Vietnam, so that part was a little easier. But the whole idea of how does that happen? And why are people taken in?
Yeah.
Why is there still, I just this morning read an article about another case of counterfeit a statue. And so I'm just fascinated by how that can happen even in this day where we have more technology,
Yeah.
but still people are taken in. So I just find that fascinating.
I like the way you
You know,
approached it, that you love to start your writing with a truth.
I do. I need to. So there has been so much written about looting from parts of Africa, parts of the Middle East, parts of Asia. And I'm thinking, my gosh, that's something I want to learn more about. So that may be the next at some point to learn why that happened. Well, I know why it happens, I think, but then how do you figure it out? How do you get the pieces returned to their rightful countries? I mean, it's just really interesting. So anyway, that's another one for the future, maybe.
Yeah. So what you do is you just look at the news, and if you see a story that fascinates you and speaks to you, you say, "Oh, well, let's see where this goes."
Yes, exactly. You start with that as the seed and then let it grow and see where it can go.
Yeah. We've talked about your books. We've talked about where you find ideas from, and it's amazing for people to realize, because you're a professor um of your own in your own field, right? Business, innovation, and
Mhm.
professors. The way I see professors, usually the ones advancing knowledge in their respective fields, right? So what I mean by that is, for engineering, for example, the professors are the one discovering, okay, what's the next, theory, application, things we can work on to
Mhm.
get to the next step, right?
Mhm.
And so being at the edge, right? In order to advance knowledge, you have to be at the edge of knowledge so you can advance it. And
Mhm.
you've left that place, and now you're you're at the very beginning, right? For a lot of persons, it's especially when you're that high, right? And it's a painful experience. Sometimes we get frustrated, and I'm glad that
Yeah.
you were able to go through that, and even coupled with the fact that it wasn't like, oh, a 25-year-old kid from college that was just trying, okay, let me see how to write fiction, right? uh, so for me, what advice would you give to someone who wants to reinvent themselves creatively, whether it's move from engineering to writing, from to something else, right? Completely different, no matter their age.
Hmm. Another good question. Um, you're right. I will never win a Nobel Prize because I have not studied the same topic for 35 years. So, about every 7 years, I changed my research focus as a professor dramatically. So, for a while, I studied women professionals working overseas, working abroad. I studied mergers and acquisitions. I studied transition economies when I worked in Vietnam, and then creativity. And I think that to reinvent, um I guess I go back to curiosity. What is it that you can see yourself focusing on for several years, not your whole lifetime, but enough time to become a little bit of an expert and know enough that you can write about it or talk about it, and it has to be something that really is in your heart. I learned a long time ago that I am good at being on the edge, identifying areas to study and research and go and do them. But once they become popular, I can't compete.
Yeah.
So competitive advantage is sort of seeing out in the future what might be an interesting thing to study. I'm also I don't like just to do surveys. I like to talk to people, look at them eye to eye, and get stories from them.
Yeah.
And so so many of the things that I've done, research areas, came from a question from a student or something I saw. So I think if you're thinking about making a change, figure out what it is that you can compete in. What's your competitive advantage, and can you transfer that to somewhere else? So
Yeah.
I will never be a brain surgeon. No, but I have other things that I can do that the skill is transferable. So to be able to see forward, to be able to make unusual connections, I can do that in a couple of different areas.
Yeah.
So what are the key things that you already know you can do well? And then can you transfer those to another discipline, to another country, to it'll vary based on what you're interested in, but I think the curiosity piece and something that you can stay with, whether it's studying or becoming good at for several years, so that you gain some expertise and then you'll feel comfortable in that new field. And then you decide, do I stay here or do I move away? Years ago, very, very accomplished person where I live here, sports coach, said, why do you stay in this town, this city? You could go somewhere else in the world. And I said, I can reinvent myself every 7 years if I want to. In his work, he had to literally change cities and change organizations. So I think I have been so lucky to be able to reinvent myself, but stay in the same university. They allowed me to be entrepreneurial. I call myself an academic entrepreneur. So
Yeah.
if that's what you want to do, if you want to reinvent yourself, find a place that supports that. I guess that's
Yeah.
the
An
other piece of it.
environment. Yeah.
What organization would support that kind of change over time?
Oh, thank
A
you
lot
so
of
much.
different factors. Yeah.
Yeah. What's next for uh, what's next for your fiction journey, and where can we get your book?
Well, the two fiction books that are out are on Amazon or in local bookstores in the US. People can and ask for them. But I would say Amazon is probably the best. It's on Kindle. It's a hard copy. Eventually, we'll have an audio copy, but that's not there. Well, the first one is audio. Second one, not yet. What's next? I'm already working on another novel. I would like to do maybe 2 or 3 set in Vietnam, partly because I want to help people understand Vietnam as more than, at least Americans think of it as, a war. It's a lot more than that. It's also more than great food. So I want to help them understand a little bit more about the people and the culture of Vietnam. So I would like to do at least one more book there. Um, Again, a mystery. And then I think just in general, I will keep learning about how to write better. I don't know if I'll stick with tennis. We'll have to see. But I want to learn how to write better. And at this point, I have a mantra that I've used for many, many years for myself in terms of choosing projects. And it is, can I do good work? Meaning, can I do good work that's quality work, but also do work that's good for people, that somehow helps people understand Vietnam or something else? Can I learn a lot? Can I work with good people? And can I have fun? And so over the course of my career, when opportunities come up, I look at those 4. If 3 are there, no question, I'll do it. If it's only 2, then I think about it a little harder. But right now, I am learning a lot. I hope I'm improving my work. It may not be really good yet, but it's getting better. I'm having loads of fun, and I'm getting to work with really interesting people. I can interview them for the research part. I'm working with great people for marketing. So, I mean, what's not to do?
Yeah.
It's not to love.
So the moment you started sharing that framework, I just remember the previous interview we did, and I was just smiling. That was part of the reason why I was smiling when you hopped on the course. It's one of those
Yeah.
framework that every time I adopt, right? I don't want to use the word steal. I adopt. Thank you so much,
You could steal
Nancy.
anything. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope it's helpful.
I'll put all the relevant links um in the description. You did not. You do have a website, right?
I do have a website.
Yeah,
It's Nancy Napier.com. Yeah.
Okay, I'll put that in the description and the show note so listeners can click
Super.
and go see all the places they can connect with you on. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Lovely. I'll put the podcast there as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's it for today's episode of the Observe Day podcast. Thank you for spending your time with us as we explore today's observance. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with a friend who'd love to celebrate life's special days too. Don't forget to join the newsletter at observeday.com/join for more observance stories, tips, and updates. Until next time, keep finding meaning in every day.